Hello everybody, and welcome to the first major release of Telerik Kendo UI for 2016. We've got a huge release to show to you today, some awesome features and some really big announcements, so I hope you'll stick with us. My name is Burke Holland. I am the Director of Developer Relations at Telerik, a Progress company. It's my pleasure to be with you today and to serve as the MC before I introduce our fantastic group of presenters. You can follow me on Twitter at Burke Holland. I would love to hear from you. We would also love for you to follow our official accounts. That would be at Kendo UI or at Telerik. We're going to tweet out all of our winners from the fabulous prizes that we've got today from these accounts. And we also tweet out company news whenever we talk about roadmaps and share sort of the future and what we're planning. So if you're interested in that, you can follow us at those places. We would love to have you. As always, if you have technical difficulties today, possibly with audio or with video, or maybe something else happens and the internet goes out, whatever happens, don't worry. Worst case scenario, you can watch this later on YouTube in high definition. It'll be awesome. If you do have audio or video problems, though, we do encourage you to drop down into the Q&A chat window. Let us know. We've got people that are standing by that are ready to help. All right, so let's get right to the prizes. We went a little bit of a different route this time. A lot of times we do phones and tablets and computers, which are awesome, and this time we're thinking outside of the box. So we're giving you a device that will let you print your own box. This is a 3D printer. I personally remember the original 3D printer. I don't know, all the kids out there that were a child of the 80s may remember this. This is the original 3D printer, right? Of course it is. We're also giving away today a Lego Mindstorms kit. This one's new to me. I've got a lot of Legos in my house, but I wasn't really sure what Mindstorms are, but apparently this is a fully programmable set of Legos that you can build and then program to do all sorts of amazing things. Now, the box shows building things like this, which looks like battle bots or something, so maybe you can only program them to fight. I'm not really sure there. But I know for me personally as a parent, Legos are more like this in my house, sort of either half eaten by the dog or embedded in my foot when I'm trying to get a drink of water in the middle of the night. So thanks Legos, this Mindstorm kit could be yours, and these Legos could be in the bottom of your foot if you're lucky. And then lastly, we've got a Roku 4. This is the latest streaming technology supporting up to 4K video. And if you're big into streaming like I am, this means that you could be binge watching episodes on Netflix where you get 15 seconds between episodes to decide if you're going to do anything with your life today. Now, if Netflix isn't available in your region, I'm sure there's a lot of other streaming options and maybe you'll be more productive anyway. Now, Mishko Havery from the Angular team once said there are two types of documentation, the kind people don't read and the kind they complain about. Now, this is obviously a tongue-in-cheek take on documentation, but we're always trying to refine our docs and make them better. And this time around, you'll notice that we are rolling out some changes to our documentation in waves along with this release. We're going for a better look, faster docs, and docs that are easier to navigate. If you have any thoughts about that and want to let us know, I bet you do have thoughts and opinions on the documentation, please drop into the Q&A panel. Let us know how you feel. Secondly, I want to talk about Microsoft's end-of-life announcement on Internet Explorer that happened as of January 12th. All versions of Internet Explorer prior to 11 are no longer supported by Microsoft. Instead, they want you to use Internet Explorer 11 and use something called Enterprise Mode, which provides backwards compatibility for those browsers. If you're stressed about that and that causes you some anxiety, don't be. It's a natural progression for Microsoft, and we're here to still support you all the way back to Internet Explorer 8. And we will be here to support you on Enterprise Mode in Internet Explorer 11 as well. And of course, in the lovely evergreen browsers, if you are so lucky to be in a place where your users are on those. I also wanted to show you something today that was sort of new to me. We are shipping app templates in all of the downloads for Kendo UI, and we're shipping a new template this time around for a dashboard. So if we look inside the download that you get from Kendo UI, you'll see an app templates folder, and then in there, there's a new folder called dashboard. And if you go in there, you can just right click on this index file and open it right up in the browser. and you'll get this lovely dashboard. If you want to see how we built this, simply open the DevTools here, and you can see up here that we're using Bootstrap. You can check the HTML, see how we laid that out with containers and whatnot. And then in this script tag here, you'll see all of the code that we use. Let me expand this a little bit to make this happen. And to be honest with you, there's not a lot of it. So if you're looking to build a dashboard with nice interactivity, check this out. This can definitely jumpstart you in that regard. Okay, we've got a lot of great demos today. First up is going to be Jen Looper talking about everything that's new in the spreadsheet widget. Then we're going to have Cody Lindley come and talk about the grid, easily the most popular Kendo UI control by a long shot. Some new stuff there that he's going to cover. And then TJ VanToll is going to come in what I'm pretty sure is going to be the most popular segment to talk about what's new in the future of Kendo UI. We've got some big announcements to make today. We hope that you'll stick around for that. It's going to be very important. And then lastly, we're going to have a guest appearance from Ed Charbonneau, developer advocate on the team for ASP.NET MVC, to show you a little bit of what we're shipping that's new for ASP.NET MVC developers. Some really cool stuff there. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Jen to kickstart us with some fantastic demos. Jen, it's all you.
Hey everyone, thanks Burke. I'm Jen, and I'm here with my pals Hans and Franz to get you pumped up for the new spreadsheet widget and to talk about some cool new things with the Kendo UI Grid. So are you excited? Let's get going. Okay, with this new release, the Kendo UI spreadsheet is now out of beta and it's ready for prime time, so you can start creating online spreadsheets that can really help your creation of line of business applications. So with this new spreadsheet widget, you can use it as it is out of the box to manage data that you're inputting, or you can use it to display and manipulate external data. Out of the box is pretty awesome, but you can control its behavior via code as well. So we're going to take a look at how to do that. So I encourage you to just take a solid look at the spreadsheet demos online at demos.telerik.com. And those demos show both simple and complex use cases like server importing and exporting and binding to local and remote data. And just take a look as well at the docs for the spreadsheet, which show how much we've enhanced the API for this widget. There are instructions here on how to configure the spreadsheet, like managing Excel and PDF creation, the methods of the widget, such as inserting, renaming, and removing sheets, and the events triggered by changes to the spreadsheet, such as rendering it and exporting and importing data. So in the last Kendo webinar, which was the birthday webinar, I introduced the spreadsheet widget, which with some mocked up data. And so this time I thought that it would be cool to demo how to use real data from an external service. So I live in Massachusetts, where we have snowy winters, and sometimes the roads get really bad. Pretty much the driving experience is like this. This is my morning commute. It made me laugh. I'm just kidding. It made me laugh, though, that the comment on this video actually was that at least when it snows, the potholes are filled in. So I started to think, how bad really actually is the pothole problem in the city of Boston? And I actually had some good luck and found some cool data posted by the city of Boston on closed pothole cases. Several cities make use of the SODA service, S-O-D-A, which is Socrates, the Open Data API. And it exposes their city's data sets. It's really neat. And there's actually a mobile app that people can use to report potholes, and when they're fixed, the city updates a database, and that data is open to the public. So it's a great use case to show how live data performs in the Kendo UI Spreadsheet and Grid, or so I thought. So let's take a look. So if you dig into the API docs for this open data project, you can find filterable data via API endpoints, and it returns a nice data set in JSON format, and we can filter it by querying for request for pothole repair in the case title field. So to use this API endpoint to populate a spreadsheet widget, all we have to do is use the kendo.data.data source and read that data right on in. We create a placeholder div above with the ID of spreadsheet, and we instantiate the spreadsheet in the code below. So we're going to create one sheet with a spreadsheet widget entitled potholes. And at the bottom, we include a function to listen for changes to the data source so that we can build the spreadsheet columns according to the dataset's format. And finally, we read the data source to populate the spreadsheet. And the result is actually a pretty well-formatted data dump of the records that we just queried for from the Open Data API. And with just this much code, you have a decent spreadsheet. But how about if we wanted to customize the way the data is presented? So going back to the code, let me uncomment some bits to show how we can control how the columns will be represented. So first we need to include a function to build the columns. This is going to take an array of fields that we'll send through. And next we build a schema, parsing through some key value pairs that give a display title to the fields that we want to display. And we only want to display those fields. Now I want to configure the spreadsheet to display only the 8 most relevant columns as I delineated them above. And I'm also going to display just 200 rows in this spreadsheet. I also want to tweak my query of the API above to retrieve 200 records. You note that we retrieved 100 records earlier. And then I'm going to format the first row of cells to change the color of the background and text, and this is going to create a nice column header. And finally, I'm going to set the width of the columns to fit the data and set my data source to use the build columns function that I created at the top of the page there. So refreshing the spreadsheet, it actually now looks a lot better. So let's go ahead and put a filter on each column so that it will appear when the screen is refreshed. I just have to reference the columns and rows that I want to filter in the code from the top left, which is A1, to the bottom right, which is H200. And voila, magically, filters appear. And you can quickly filter your data in real time, and it works great. So out of the box, there's some snazzy new features of the spreadsheet widget, and I'm just going to walk through those here. The first button in the default nav is a client-side data import. So I can import my own spreadsheet right into the online sheet. Note that the formatting of my spreadsheet is automatically preserved, even after importing. Another feature is client-side exporting, which now supports PDF export as well as exporting an XLST, I screw this up every single time, an Excel file, and I think it looks really nice. And another new feature is the pull-down copy feature. You drag a cell like you do in Excel, and it'll copy below or to the side or above. It'll copy data. And the nav bar also offers cut, copy, and paste features. You can always undo your changes using the arrows above. And you can format your text in bold, italics, or underline. You can change the cell's color. You can reset it if you like. And the same thing with the border. You can change it and reset if you want to change the color of your cell border. And you can change the font face and size it and center it, make it look really great. And with these two buttons, you can manipulate decimals in your data. You can copy and format as you go. And you have the option to merge cells any way you like, and you can freeze and unfreeze parts of the spreadsheet. And finally, you can add filters to any any area of your spreadsheet. So navigating over to the Insert tab, you can insert columns and rows. And on the Validation tab, on the Data Validation tab, you can add some validation for client-side data cleanup. And the very last, very cool new thing I want to show you is localization. I get very excited about localization, very neat thing. And all you need to do that is simply add one of the many messages, JavaScript files that are included with this widget out of the box. And just by adding this file, you can convert your spreadsheet to a different language, and here it is in Bulgarian. So I hope you're at least as excited about spreadsheets as me and this guy. Okay? So before I wrap up this segment, I just want to show you one new cool thing with the data grid that makes grid filtering a little more spreadsheet-like, like what we just saw. And here it is. So using the same data as the data grid, I can filter it as I normally would by setting its columns to filterable. but by making one more tweak by adding the flag multi to the filterable parameter, my filter turns into a series of checkboxes, like what we just saw earlier in the spreadsheet. And you can see the difference between the two types of filtering, and it works really nicely. It's a pretty exciting little new feature. So I hope you are amped up about the new spreadsheet widget and this tweak to the grid. And now I'm going to turn the mic over to Cody, and he's going to talk about more new stuff.
Thanks, Jen, and greetings to everybody in attendance today. My name is Cody Lindley, and if you have any questions about anything I say today, you can hit me up on Twitter, or you can drop me an email. Today I get to speak to you guys about one of the most requested features we have for Kendo UI, and that would be the ability to disable dates in the calendar. With 477 votes, this is actually in the top 4 or 3 features that we get requested for Kendo UI. So I'm super excited to discuss this feature with you guys today, so let's jump in. Now, most of the code that I'm going to be showing you today resides inside JSBin, which means that you can access it over the internet yourself. If you just visit these URLs up here in each tab, you can go and play with the code yourself that I'm going to be working with today. Now, before we jump into the disable date option, I just wanted to sort of review what we had before disable dates came along. And really all we had was the ability to create a date range that we wanted to make available to the user. So we did that with this min and max option. And really all this is saying is I want the user to be able to select dates between February 9th and February 19th. And we would use min and max. That would of course disable all other dates outside of that range. And this is sort of the only functionality that we really had to disable dates. Now, what was really needed is we needed to be able to disable dates based on day. Maybe we wanted to disable dates based on the day of the week, or we wanted to disable a specific day of a month. And as you can see here in this calendar, I'm actually using the disabled dates option, and I'm disabling Sundays and Saturdays in this calendar. So as you can see, I cannot select the 14th or the 13th. And this is really the new feature that has been brought to the calendars through the disabled dates option. So let's take a closer look at this in detail. Here again, I just have a calendar rendered into the page. And the first thing I'm going to do, just like the previous calendar I showed you, is disable the dates Sunday and Saturday. And as you can see, this is live reloading, so we have disabled dates Sunday and Saturday, all of February. Now, if you're wondering what all those configuration values are, they are right here. It's just the first 2 letters of each day of the week, and we can disable based on the name. So the next option we have to pass the disabled dates option is a function. And this is a little bit trickier, so I'm going to go ahead and comment out this first calendar code and uncomment this new calendar code that actually is using a function. As you can see here, it would be nice to be able to disable individual dates based on the date itself. And as of today, this is pretty simplistic. If I pass the disabled dates a function, all this essentially is doing is checking to see if a particular date is passed into the function, and that's what this date value is. This date is coming in, and we're just asking if that date is equal to a particular date I have defined in that function. Or I could be pulling it, from someplace else. But this is a very simple implementation right now. I just have a variable called disable, and I have an array of dates, the 13th, the 14th, the 20th, the 21st. And this function is called for every date you see visibly in the widget right now. So, if we opened up the console and we reran this code, oops, I actually need to uncomment my console log. I'm just showing you that all this function's doing, it's just calling itself for every date that's viewable in the calendar. And it's just a function that's saying, hey, if you return true, then I'm going to disable this date. And if you return false, then I'm not going to disable this date. And so, as you can see, all I'm doing here is asking if the date is contained in this array using index of array method. And if it is, then I return true, and then that date becomes disabled. So this obviously gives us a lot of possibilities of what we could do with disabling individual days. Now, I don't know about you, but that disabled color, as you can see in a calendar here, I've gone back to disabling Tuesdays and Thursdays in this example. And I actually want to make it more obvious you can't select these dates. They're just lightly grayed out right now. But the great thing about the way this implementation worked out is there's actually a class called KStateDisabled in there. And we can, of course, write a little CSS and make it more obvious that those are disabled. And as you can see, I've got text decor strike through in there right now, or line through, excuse me. But we could even, we could put something in there like blur, just to, I'm just really showing you this so that you guys realize that that hook is there to make it more obvious these things are disabled. Now, I don't want you to think this just applies to the calendar. Because the date picker and the date time picker both use the calendar, you also have the ability to use disabled dates option inside of these widgets. So obviously here I'm just disabling Sunday and Saturday again, but if we open that up, of course we'll see Sunday and Saturday disabled, and the same for the date time picker. Now, I just need to mention that there is another demo besides the ones that I've shown you. You can obviously go back and look at those after this webinar is over. But we do actually have a unique demo for each of these showing a more advanced solution. One, very simple, that was disabling weekends, but then we have one that's showing a pretty practical use case for disabling national holidays. So if you plan on using this soon, you might go check out this demo. It's in the Kendo UI demos. Now, the last thing I want to talk about before I hand things back to Ed is in the next release of Kendo UI, we're actually going to extend this option a little bit more, and we're actually going to make it possible to just pass date objects to disable dates as an array. This will make it really simple to just pull an array of dates out of your data and just simply pass it to a calendar, and those dates would be disabled. So definitely look for that in the future. I think that's it for me. I'll pass it off to TJ now.
Awesome. Thanks, Cody, and thanks again to all of you that joined us today. My name is TJ VanToll, and no offense to Jen, Cody, or Ed, but I think I have the most exciting topic of the day because I get to talk about the future of Kendo UI, both in 2016 and beyond. Now, Kendo UI turned 4 last November, and we're really proud of what we've been able to achieve in those 4 years. But 4 years is also a really long time in the software development world, and a lot has changed. 4 years ago, jQuery was the de facto choice for building web applications. But today, things are a lot more complicated. jQuery is still very much around and very much relevant, of course, but there are now numerous options for building your web apps, including Backbone and Ember and Angular and React and Polymer, and plenty of others that I don't have space to fit on this slide. Now, as the JavaScript world has evolved, Kendo UI has evolved as well. About 2.5 years ago, if you can believe that it's been that long, our very own Burke Holland wrote this blog post here announcing the initial release of our Angular 1 support in Kendo UI. Now, this started as a Kendo Labs project and was later incorporated into the core of Kendo UI several months later. Our decision to add this first-class Angular 1 support was really heavily based on feedback from you, our users and customers, and we're consistently looking at the things that you're asking for to decide what comes next for Kendo UI. And with that in mind, the two biggest requests that we're hearing from you today is for us to support two new frameworks, Angular 2 and React. Therefore, one of our big focuses in 2016 is building first-class components for each of these two frameworks. And to do so, we're going to need to take a fundamentally different approach than we did with Angular 1. If you're familiar with Angular 1, you may know that although Angular 1 doesn't directly depend on jQuery, it does ship with a subset of jQuery's APIs known as JQLite. And in general, Angular 1 was really designed to work alongside jQuery quite nicely. Because of that, for Kendo UI, we were able to bridge our existing jQuery widgets to work rather seamlessly in an Angular 1 environment. In fact, because Kendo UI Core is open source and on GitHub, you can actually dig through the code to see exactly how we did it. Just go to the Kendo UI Core repo in the Telerik organization on GitHub and look for the kendo.angular.js file. You could just peruse through this file to see exactly how the magic happens. With Angular 2 and React, however, we need to take a fundamentally different approach. One of the key features of these two frameworks is that they abstract away the DOM from you as a developer. React, for instance, is well known for its concept of a virtual DOM, which essentially attempts to manage the DOM of your web app for you in a performant way. And if you look at Angular 2, one of the key goals that Google had in mind was to improve Angular's core architecture so that Angular was not so coupled to the DOM and the browser in the same way that Angular 1 was. Now the reason the Angular team did this is that this decoupled architecture, just having a JavaScript framework that's not so tied to the browser, makes a number of cool things possible. One of them, and the bottom bullet I have listed here, is the ability to pre-render Angular components in a server-side environment, for instance in a Node.js app. This was previously a feature advantage that React had on Angular 1, but Angular's 2 updated architecture brings this same pre-rendering feature to the Angular community. Another thing this decoupled architecture enables is the ability to render in environments other than the browser. React does this with React Native, and here at Telerik, our very own NativeScript team is currently working directly with Google to allow you to build truly native iOS and Android apps using NativeScript and Angular 2. The setup is pretty cool. It's pretty amazing just to use a JavaScript framework, Angular 2, to build native iOS and Android apps with native user interface controls. And it does open up some pretty cool opportunities for both skill and code reuse across web and native apps. If you're interested in learning more, head to bit.ly/nativescript-angular, and there you'll find an article that'll walk you through the details of how it all works. But the key thing here when it comes to Kendo UI is that this different decoupled architecture that these JavaScript frameworks use makes it impractical, or in some cases downright impossible, to bridge our existing jQuery widgets like we did with Angular 1. So instead, we'll be building new Kendo UI components from the ground up. One set for Angular 2, one set for React, and both without any dependency on jQuery. It's our belief that this approach will result in components that really seamlessly integrate into each of these two environments. However, because we'll be building these components from scratch, it'll be some time yet before these new components are available for you to use. Our plan is to roll them out throughout 2016 and into 2017. The first batch of components will include most of our form widgets, so things like the drop-down list, date pickers, and such. And we're planning on having those components available around May of this year. But as you might imagine, these plans are very tentative at this point, and you can expect details to change as these products evolve. Now with all this talk of Angular 2 and React, there's one final thing I want to make very clear in regards to our existing jQuery widgets. Namely, that they're not going away, and not only that, they will continue to get the same love and attention that they get today. In fact, we already have a slew of new features planned for these widgets in our next release. The first of these is support for Bootstrap 4 in Sass, which I'm personally pretty excited about. Through this, we'll not only be offering complete support for Bootstrap 4, but we'll also provide a full theming API, including Sass variables that you can use to customize the styling of your app. Next, we have a few new features coming to our HTML editor widget, including support for Markdown, and that's both importing from Markdown formatted files, as well as exporting content as Markdown as well. We'll also be doing URL auto detection and a few other small things as well. On top of that, we have a few enhancements to the Spreadsheet widget that Jen showed earlier, some Visual Studio MVC scaffolding additions, specifically a few improvements to the TreeView server wrapper that we've gotten some feedback about, a new dashboard project template for our .NET MVC users, as well as support for ASP.NET Core 1.0, MVC 6 support, and plenty of other smaller things that we don't have time to go over in a lot of detail today. As always, we really value your feedback as it's important to help us determine what comes next for Kendo UI. You can head to our feedback portal at kendoui-feedback.telerik.com, where you can suggest new features, vote for features, and comment on what you'd like to see come next. We'd also love to hear from you today during this webinar. Feel free to ask any questions you may have about the future of Kendo UI in the Q&A panel, and we'll answer the most popular questions at the end of today's event. Now, I hope you're as excited as I am, but with that, I'm out of time, so I'm going to pass things over to my colleague Ed Charbonneau, who's going to be talking about what we're working on in the .NET MVC world. Take it away, Ed.
Thanks for the floor, TJ. It's hard to believe it's 2016 already, but we have a lot of awesome things to share in this release, and even more exciting things on the horizon. So let's dive into UI for ASP.NET MVC. Telerik UI for ASP.NET MVC consists of 70 plus controls, all powered by our Kendo UI product. Kendo UI provides feature-rich UIs rendered with HTML5, CSS3, and JavaScript that work seamlessly on any device with responsive and adaptive rendering. You also get full control over the user experience with robust client-side APIs. But with UI for ASP.NET MVC, you get more than that. You get server-side rendering using Razor helpers, which means you have full IntelliSense and Visual Studio scaffolding to boost productivity. So let's take a look at what's new. But first, since we're on the subject of ASP.NET, let's cover some breaking news. You might have heard that ASP.NET 5 is dead. So what exactly does that mean? This means that Microsoft has changed some of the naming conventions with the upcoming release of what we probably knew as vNext. ASP.NET 4.6 and the .NET Framework 4.6 will continue to be developed and remain Windows only, while .NET Core will be the new beginning for .NET as an open-source, cross-platform framework. We've been staying on top of these changes at Telerik so we can make sure we have your back and support developers with the tools you need. Later on, I'll show some demos of what Telerik has coming for .NET Core. But first, let's talk about the new features added in this release of Telerik UI for ASP.NET MVC. First, the spreadsheet that debuted as a beta in the last release is now official. We also have a new Excel filtering feature for the grid control. Brand new Visual Studio templates are coming as part of Service Pack 1 of this release. And just as promised, we'll take a look at the .NET Core support. First, I'm happy to announce the official release of our spreadsheet control. The new spreadsheet control provides the power of MS Excel right in the user's browser. Many of the features that you would expect from Excel are there, like formulas, functions, sorting, filtering, autofill, and much more. Even better, our control has robust client-side API that puts you in full control of the spreadsheet. Let's jump over to Visual Studio so we can see how a spreadsheet's created in MVC. So I have Visual Studio open because I want to show you how easy it is to get the new spreadsheet control integrated in your next project. Here I have a blank MVC application, and I have UI for ASP.NET MVC installed. What I'm going to do is add a simple Razor HTML helper, HTML Kendo spreadsheet, and I'm going to give it a name of my spreadsheet. And that's all that's required to add a spreadsheet to your page. I'm going to go ahead and save this and click Run. And how easy is that? I have a new spreadsheet control rendered right on my page for users to interact with. And even some of the more advanced features from Excel are there, like autofill. You can see I can enter January and February here and just highlight and drag them across to get all the months of the year. If you'd like to see additional demos of how to import, export, and save spreadsheet data to SQL, then stop by blogs.telerik.com after today's webinar. We'll be posting a recap which includes not only this webinar, but clips from our previous webinar, where we highlight these key features. Next, I want to highlight a brilliant feature that came from our spreadsheet control, but improves upon our world-class grid control. Now the Kendo grid control has an intuitive filter that you would find in MS Excel. This means you can offer your customers a user experience that they're already familiar with. Let's jump into a demo to see this in action. So I'm back in Visual Studio, but this time I have a different application open. This is a dashboard application that I've been building, and you can see I have a grid in this view. And the grid has multiple columns of data. And if we open up our browser, this is what the application looks like. I have a column called product name in this grid. And if I click on the filter icon, you can see I get a nice filter option here. But the type of filter that I have is a little more intuitive to developers than maybe it is to my users. So let's see if we can offer them a user interface that's a little more familiar to them, like the one that we have in Excel. So I'm going to go back into this view that I have, and I'm going to add a new filtering option to my product name column. And you can see I've set filterable equal to multi and search equal to true. So if I save this page and go back to the application and refresh, and I go over to my product name filter and click on it, you can see I'm presented with all of the data that is in that column, and I can easily click on these checkboxes. I can select tofu and chai and hit filter, and now I have that data filtered out. So this is very simple stuff that is just like you would get in MS Excel, and we can present that to the user just by changing a couple properties on our column. Now let's shift our attention to what the future of UI for ASP.NET MVC looks like. We're talking about applications that work on any screen size and any client, but also work on any server. With .NET Core, you can write ASP.NET MVC apps that can run anywhere. And Telerik wants to make sure that you're supported no matter where you develop, deploy, or run your application. UI for MVC already works with ASP.NET 4.6, but in addition, we also support ASP.NET Core. So let me pull up my Ubuntu machine and show you how UI for ASP.NET MVC looks like in my development environment there. So here I have my Ubuntu desktop open, and I'm going to come over here and click on Visual Studio Code. And if you're not familiar, Visual Studio Code is a Microsoft editor that's open source and cross-platform. And I have a project open in here, and you can see there's models, views, controllers. So this is an MVC 6 application that is written on top of ASP.NET Core. And if I go to my index page, you can see Telerik UI for ASP.NET MVC, and I'm using some of the Razor helpers. So I'm going to go ahead and run this application. And I'm going to click on the root directory and hit open in terminal. And to start the web server on Ubuntu, I'm just going to type in dnx web. And you can see the application is started up, and all I need to do is navigate over to that URL. And I'm going to come into Firefox and type localhost. So you can see the demo page is loaded, and I have my Kendo UI controls on the page. And if I scroll down, you can even see I have a grid control here with filtering enabled and paging. And this shows that we have support for ASP.NET MVC 6 cross-platform running on Ubuntu. How cool is that? So once again, we're going to be recapping the webinar on blogs.telerik.com. And we'll make sure to add a link to our GitHub repository so you can download the MVC6 application I just showed and run it on your own Mac or Linux box. Let's take a quick look at what we covered. There's the all-new spreadsheet control. Excel-like filtering is now available for grids. The new Visual Studio templates will be here in Service Pack 1. ASP.NET Core support is here. And MVC6 tag helpers will be coming soon. That's all for me. Over to you, Burke.
Thank you, Ed. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Cody, Jen, fantastic demos, and thank you, TJ, excellent coverage of the future of Kendo UI, which we're going to talk a bit more in just a second here about. First, I want to talk about and sort of address this issue of front-end technologies and sort of the mess that we find ourselves in from day to day. I don't think there's really any place as daunting to be as a developer than on the front end. The technology changes so fast, and there is so much of it, and there are so many passionate people that are sort of making a lot of noise about what's the right framework to use and what's the right way to build an application. At Kendo UI, we watch these things very, very closely, and what we've seen is a dramatic shift in the way that developers work with the DOM, or the document object model, or rather just with the HTML is what that means. And what we're seeing is a move from the jQuery model of selecting an element and then working with it to a more abstracted model as the one provided by Angular and React, where instead of inserting JavaScript into the HTML, HTML is inserted into the JavaScript, which sounds really, really weird if you're coming from a typical web development background. And as we see these things move, we want Kendo UI to be there for people that are building React and Angular 2 applications so they can have the best possible UI. So that's what we're doing. We're building right now, as we speak, React and Angular 2 components for Kendo UI. Now, as TJ said, if you're a jQuery, if you're using the jQuery widgets, they're not going anywhere. We're actively building features for those right now, and those will be there for you in the future as well, so you don't feel compelled to move in any one direction. There is not a right answer. There is only the right answer that is for your project and your team. So whether it's jQuery, React, or Angular, we're going to be there with Kendo UI for all of those. Let's take a quick look at the roadmap on these. Again, the first set is coming out in May of 2016. So this will be basic components like button, drop-down list, combo box. And then by September, you'll see pretty much all of Kendo UI Core available as an open source project, Angular 2 and React components. And then as we move to the end of 2016, sort of the last major release of the year, we'll have beta components for things like the grid, the scheduler, the charts. And then by early 2017, I mean very early 2017, all of Kendo UI, both Core and Professional, will be available as pure Angular 2 and React components. Again, we are rebuilding this from the ground up. This is not us trying to shoehorn jQuery widgets into an Angular 2 or React world. Now lastly, I wanted to introduce you to one of the newest members of the Kendo UI team. As a developer advocate, please join us in welcoming Todd Motto to the team. If you're an Angular developer, then you probably know Todd. You probably read a lot of his work on Angular. He's going to be joining us to talk with us about Angular 2, both on Kendo UI and the NativeScript project as well, if you're familiar with that. So Todd begins with us shortly, and you'll be hearing a lot from him. You can follow him on Twitter, although I don't know that he needs any more followers. I think he's already got like 1 million or something like that. I could be off. The future is so bright for Kendo UI. We are really excited here at Kendo UI about the things that we're doing with Kendo UI and the direction that we're going. We're excited about the jQuery and with the functionality that we're building there, and we're really excited about the Angular 2 and React components that we get to build from the ground up and make them the best that they can possibly be. We're so glad that you're on this journey with us. So with that, let's jump into a time of Q&A. With Cody. That's Cody Lindley there on the left, TJ VanToll. And then instead of Brian Rinaldi, we're going to substitute in Jen Looper. Jen, I don't know why you weren't in this picture. I think you must not have been at this event. So Jen will be there instead, and myself, and you'll hear a quick break, and then we'll catch you on the other side as we merge the lines together. Thanks so much. Have a great day.